Right now, the Riftbound Spiritforge meta is starting to settle, and subdecks are clearly rising above the rest. If you're trying to figure out what you should actually be playing right now, today we're breaking down the 5 best decks in Riftbound, what cards make them strong, and why they're winning so many games. Now keep in mind, the meta is still evolving, so these rankings could definitely change as players adapt, but based on tournament results and what people are playing right now, these are the decks you're most likely to run into. At number 5, we have Victor Control. Victor, instead of trying to win quickly, plays a slower game where you control the board early with kill spells, then outscale your opponent as the game goes longer. If we look at the list here, you can see the deck runs a large number of removal and control spells. Cards like Call of the Weak, Bellows Breath, Stupefy, and Wages of Pain allow the deck to deal with early threats and prevent aggressive decks from snowballing. One of the strongest interactions in the deck is actually Bellows Breath, Imperial Decree. Bellows Breath will allow you to ping multiple units with damage, letting Imperial Decree go and kill them. This is one of the strongest board wipes in the entire game, if not the strongest. This deck also has a lot of units that become very dangerous if they stay on board. Cards like Xin, Thousand-Tailed Watcher, Riptide Rex can generate huge pressure once the board is stabilized. Another interesting card in the deck is Pickpocket, which can generate additional resources during the game and help keep the deck up with faster strategies, being able to kill things like Seal of Discord and Draven decks, creating you a gold. Finally, the deck has a very strong finisher, called Time Warp. If the game goes long and Time Warp resolves, it can completely swing the match in your favor and often endgame shortly, bringing you from 7 to 8 points. Because of all these control tools and strong late game cards, Victor Control is very good at beating slower decks and stabilizing against mid-range strategies. However, the deck can struggle against extremely aggressive decks like Draven if it doesn't draw enough early removal. At number 4 we have Kai'Sa, which is one of the most explosive mid-game decks right now. The strategy of the deck is to establish a solid board early, then convert that board into massive pressure once Kai'Sa enters the battlefield. If we look at the deck list here, one of the key cards is Ferocious Forerunner. This card is extremely important because it helps set up the kind of board presence that Kai'Sa decks rely on, and it's very awkward to remove. When Forerunner sticks on the battlefield, it can quickly turn a normal board into a serious threat. The deck also runs a number of strong mid-game units that help maintain pressure and control battlefields. These units make it difficult for opponents to stabilize once the Kai'Sa player begins developing their strategy. Then, later in the game, you have cards like Thousand-Tailed Watcher, which act as a powerful late-game threat. Once the board is already established, Watcher becomes a huge unit that can quickly take over combat and close out games, giving -3 to all enemy units. Kai'Sa herself acts as the centerpiece of the deck. When she enters the battlefield, she can immediately turn an already strong board into a winning position. The deck also runs disruption tools like Stupefy and Singularity, which can help control enemy threats while the Kai'Sa player continues building pressure. Because of this combination of strong mid-game units, powerful threats like Thousand-Tailed Watcher, and the explosive impact of Kai'Sa herself, the deck can swing games extremely quickly. One turn the board looks manageable, then all of a sudden Kai'Sa enters the battlefield and the game becomes very difficult to recover from. At number 3 we have Ezreal, which is one of the strongest control decks in the Riftbound meta right now. If we take a look at the list here, one of the main things you'll notice is that the deck runs a lot of card draw. Cards like Called Shot, Stacked Deck, and Purple Ezreal are extremely important because they help the deck draw through cards very quickly. The faster the Ezreal player can cycle through their deck, the easier it is to find the spells and combo pieces they need. Another really important card in the deck is Fizz. Fizz allows the players to use spells from their discard, which means the Ezreal player can reuse important removal or combo pieces multiple times during the game. This gives the deck a lot of flexibility and makes it very difficult for opponents to run the Ezreal player out of resources. The deck also uses Vex, which helps reduce the cost of spells. When Vex is on the board and in combat, it becomes much easier to chain multiple spells together in the same turn. Once all these pieces are together, the draw from Called Shot and Stacked Deck, the recursion from Fizz, and the cheaper spells of Vex, the deck can create some really explosive turns where multiple spells are played in a single round. Those turns can completely swing the game, because the Ezreal player is controlling the board while also generating huge value from their spells. Because of this combination of draw power, spell recursion, and cost reduction, Ezreal is one of the most consistent control decks in the Riftbound meta right now. At number 2 we have Irelia, which is one of the strongest tempo decks in Riftbound right now. The strategy of this deck is what players often call a Protect the Queen strategy. In this case, the Queen is Irelia herself. The entire deck is built around getting Irelia onto the battlefield and then protecting her long enough for her to completely take over the game. If we look at the deck list here, you'll notice that the deck runs multiple ways to keep Irelia alive. Cards like Zanya's and Guardian Angel are extremely important because they allow the Irelia player to protect their key unit from removal. If an opponent tries to remove Irelia, these protection tools can keep her on the board and force the opponent to deal with her again and again and again. Cards such as Defiant Dance can help subtract might from units and increase Irelia's might. Another important utility card is Ride the Wind, which helps reposition Irelia and create better combat situations. This allows the Irelia player to control how battles play out and take advantage of favorable trades. Once Irelia stays on the battlefield for multiple turns, the deck starts to snowball very quickly. The repeated attacks and constant pressure force the opponent to spend all their resources trying to stabilize. And if they can't remove Irelia quickly, the pressure becomes overwhelming and the game can end very fast. At the number 1 spot, we actually have a tie, because right now, the strongest deck in Riftbound is a Draven deck. But there are 2 main versions that are performing extremely well, Draven Miracle and Draven Midrange. Let's start with Draven Miracle. Draven Miracle is built around generating huge explosive turns by cycling through cards very quickly. Cards such as Stacked Deck and Called Shot allow the deck to draw through a large portion of the deck and assemble powerful combinations. Once the engine gets going, the deck can create massive turns where multiple threats hit the board all at once. This is where cards like Battering Ram, Rasa the Sunderer become extremely dangerous, because they can suddenly create overwhelming pressure. The goal of Draven Miracle is to set up these explosive turns and overwhelm the opponent before they have time to recover. Now for the other version of the deck, Draven Midrange, which plays a much more straightforward strategy. Instead of relying on combo turns, Draven Midrange focuses on strong early units and winning combat through efficient trades. Units like Ferocious Forerunner and other aggressive threats allow the deck to contest battlefields immediately and start applying pressure from the very beginning of the game. This version of the deck is extremely consistent because it doesn't rely on assembling a combo. Instead, it simply plays strong units, wins combat exchanges, and slowly pushes the opponent out of the game. Both versions of Draven are extremely powerful, but they win in different ways. Draven Miracle wins through explosive combo turns and massive board swings, while Draven Midrange wins through constant pressure and efficient combat. And because both these strategies are performing so well right now, Draven sits firmly at the top of the Riftbound meta. So those are what I think are the best 5 decks in Riftbound right now. To recap the list, we have Victor Control at number 5, Kai'Sa Control at number 4, Ezreal Control at number 3, Irelia Tempo at number 2, and then Draven Miracle and Draven Midrange tied for the number 1 spot in the current meta. But the Riftbound meta is still evolving, and as players continue to experiment with new strategies, we could definitely see some changes in these rankings. Let me know in the comments what deck you think is the best right now, or if you think I missed something that should be on this list. And if you want more Riftbound content like deck guides, tournament breakdowns, and meta analysis, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.